but talking about issues of diversity and inclusion, when you really start to get down to the core of why we're talking about this, it can be uncomfortable. And so we need to find out what makes this, how can we make this conversation manageable? Not comfortable, because being uncomfortable is part of the process. But what's important for you to feel valued and heard? What is important to consider, for us all to consider as a group? And what norms do you want to see set in this discussion? It's not a training. What do you think? Any suggestions? How do you feel comfortable having a conversation about something that is uncomfortable? Well, I will offer some. Hopefully you will speak up more than you did in response to that first question. And you will respect the other voices, because with diversity, you're going to come with diverse perspectives. And you might not agree, but you're going to hopefully respect and agree to disagree with other folks. Listen, but also speak from your perspective, and not necessarily put your perspective on other folks. And seek understanding. I mean, that's why we're here at the University of Rhode Island, is so that we can increase our understanding. I see people taking copious notes. I want this to be not just you, a straight lecture, but you engaging in conversation. So you're learning not only from what I have to share, but from what your classmates have to share from their lived experiences with the diversity. See, I see some heads nodding, so this is good. Head nodding is good. And embrace the discomfort, because it's part of the learning process. And I use this analogy. How many people took calculus? Okay, how many people got an A in calculus? Okay, all right, how many people struggled with calculus? Okay, so, but you didn't say, I'm not gonna do it. You finished, because that's our whole lot of hands up. But it wasn't always comfortable. So sometimes there are topics like math, so we were talking about chemistry earlier, that are not comfortable, but you don't say, I'm not going to do it because I'm not comfortable with it. You're going to say, how many people read that book? Did this students have to read the, no, not that. It was a great book this year for the freshman reading. And even though many of you are upper class people, there was a book called Mindset, and then talked about just how we approach learning. So I highly recommend it. So embrace the discomfort. So here, hopefully this will work. Oh God, I hope it works. Oh goodness, now how to make it. Can you hear it? I can't, how do you? Can you hear it?
Barely, because it's coming straight from your computer.
How do I get to come through the computer? It's coming. Okay. Can you hear it better now? Yes?
The Office of Equity University decided to have a transformative impact on the overall university.
URI's Office of Equity and Diversity has 4 key initiatives under its umbrella. The Multicultural
Yes, no.
Center.
have opened the space to multicultural organizations.
How do we turn it
But
up?
for Austin, when you think about diversity, the goal is to educate the entire campus community.
Diversity Awards is kind of the most exciting event for me here at the Multicultural Center.
To acknowledge all those champions who are working for a more diverse, a more communitarian URI.
The Women's Center.
What we do here is try to support women in everything that they do. What the Women's Center does is they put on a lot of events that empower women on campus. It was when I moved here, it felt like even more of a home. It was a small community, and the girls I met here were all different majors, but we still had a connection.
The Office of Affirmative Action, Equal Opportunity and Diversity.
The work that we focus on includes students, faculty, and staff, and making sure their work and learning environment is fair and equitable. We want our faculty and staff to be reflective of the students that we serve and the world that we
LGBTQ Center encourages students to explore their different identities. One of our things is you don't have to come out to come in.
So we have safe zone training, and that's really helped me learn about myself, helped me be able to teach others to be more inclusive. This is a great sense of family and community.
I am honored to be able to speak here today at such a monumental point in history for the university. I struggled with my identity for most of my life until I came to URI and became part of the LGBTQ Center. And now I'm standing here in front of the site for the first freestanding LGBTQ Center built from the ground up for that specific purpose at any institution in the nation.
I was just really excited, it's like all this hard work is like started kind of.
This isn't a piece of real estate tucked away some corner of the campus. It's very prominent.
The facility will be located right at the main entrance to the university.
It's like very present. It's like, hey, so the fact that we are the first speaks so loud.
It speaks volumes to the university's commitment.
In making history.
We're not only thinking big, but we're doing big for gender and sexuality at URI.
It excites me to see the steps that you've already taken. It makes you feel like you're part of something bigger.
So think big,
Think unity.
Think inclusive.
think justice, think everybody, think diverse. We do.
We do.
Did you hear enough of it? How many of you knew what community, equity, and diversity was here at the University of Rhode Island before today? How many, by a show of hands? Okay, maybe about a quarter. How many of you are familiar with all of the centers that are associated with community, equity, and diversity? Oh, wait, larger. Now, did you know that there was an affiliation between the centers? Seems like more people know about the centers than about community, equity, and diversity. So hopefully what you heard was President Dooley talking in the very beginning and saying that this is one of our values. And hopefully coming out, you'll see the academic plan. And diversity and equity are core values of the university. And I think what makes the University of Rhode Island wonderful and unique in this regard is that not only do we here at the University of Rhode Island talk about the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion, but we practice what we preach. And so I know this is like an outmoded form of communication. How many people read the paper? Anybody? Oh my goodness, you're all good, yay, yay. Okay, how many people read the Projo today? Anybody? I don't usually read the paper online. I am dating myself, and that is one of the dimensions of diversity. But if you read the Projo online, one of the headline was racial tension at Providence College, 13-hour sit-in ends in a deal. And the reason why I spent the money, $2, to buy this Projo Projo was because to illustrate the fact that, number one, issues of diversity, equity, and inclusion are very present in our world. They make the paper, they make the news every single day, the multiple dimensions, whether it's having to do with women's rights or LGBTQ rights or issues of race or just difference. They're constantly in our world. So we can pretend that it's not of importance to us, but the reality is it's constantly an issue of discussion. But also, I just wanted to bring kind of the contrast of the words from our new academic plan, which embrace diversity and inclusion, but also set goals. How can we be better? So this is saying, you know what? We at the University of Rhode Island, we don't have our students, as of today, sitting in and protesting and saying that we need to do better, but we're acknowledging, and Dr. Wells, as you were part of the development of the academic plan, but in goal 4, saying we value diversity, equity, and inclusion, but we need to do better. And this is our roadmap to doing better here at the University of Rhode Island. We have diversity in our classrooms, but we need to do better. One of the commitments that the university has made is that over the years, the past 5 to 6 years, the provost, how many people even know what a provost is? Does anybody know the provost? Oh, yeah, okay. What's your name with the hat?
Girotonda.
Girotonda?
Yeah.
And what is a provost and who is our provost?
they in charge of money?
Well, no, not really. I mean, they probably do. Anybody else? Because it's a key role here at the university. In the back. The provost is,
Are you
yeah.
talking to me?
Yeah.
I have to know, I work here.
Okay, but I think everybody should know who the provost is and what the provost does. You want to share?
Sure. So the provost, I'm probably not gonna get it entirely right.
That's
So the
okay.
president goes out there and he's fundraising and sort of working as the figurehead of the university, but the provost is sort of the workhorse individual leader at the university. And so he's developing the strategic plan, he's deciding which departments are gonna get new faculty, and so that's how I think of him.
Absolutely. The provost is also considered the chief academic officer. So that person, how many people look to see when there's a snow day? He's the guy who calls the snow day. He's that important. He calls the snow day, but he also is responsible for all of the academic units and all of the departments and hiring of faculty, promoting of faculty, whether faculty gets tenure or not, what classes you can and cannot take. And so for the provost, one of his priorities is not just, well, he's responsible for how much diversity we bring in. And I'm looking at this room, and there's a lot of women. So we look for a balance of, male, female, gender diversity, as well as cultural, racial, ethnic diversity, international diversity, as many different ways as possible, because we believe it makes the educational experience that much more robust and rich for all of you. And there are studies that go on to talk about that in different ways. So, oh, this is fun. Well, it's fun for me. Maybe it's not fun for you. So the question is, don't read the slide because it's tiny. Is diversity harder than physics? How many people say yes? How many people say no? So, okay, there's 3 or 4 people say yes. How many people say no? Okay, and then there's a lot of indecisive people. It's a trick question, because if you had asked me this 2 or 3 days ago, I would be like, I don't know, physics is really hard for me. I didn't really do well in physics when I was in school. But this quote is from NPR. Does anybody listen? Am I like the only NPR? Okay, there's some folks who listen to NPR. Yay for the folks who listen to NPR. I was listening to this piece on NPR the other day, and they were talking about Intel. Intel, are folks familiar with Intel? Some folks are, it's a high-tech company. And they were talking about the fact that they too, like the University of Rhode Island, values diversity and inclusion, and they wanted to increase their population, their staff of women and minorities, or women or people of color, by 40%. So this is an industry that is predominantly dominated by men and white men. And so they said, okay, we're going to set out to have this goal of diversifying our staff by 40%. When they finished the article, they talked to the head of Intel, and basically they were talking about this concept called Moore's Law, where it's putting, packing twice as many transistors into tiny computer chips every 2 years or so, and it's called Moore's Law. He went on to say that it is more difficult upholding the law or meeting diversity, which is harder. When asked which is harder, upholding that law or meeting diversity goals, he said, with diversity, every human approaches the data with bias. And so it's more difficult. So to hear somebody who's an expert in that field say, there are certain unknown factors. I don't know, I just thought it was a fun fact. But to see that because with physics there's a level of certainty, but because with diversity you're dealing with human emotion, you're dealing with history, you're dealing with years and years and decades of bias. So, where does the work of diversity and inclusion come from? This is kind of like a broad-based conversation, but it comes from the civil rights movement. The civil rights movement of, okay, how many folks studied civil rights? Okay. When was the civil rights movement? What year? Numbers. Yes, what's your name?
Ada?
Ada?
Ada, yeah.
Ada.
1968. I believe.
Okay, in that period of time. So the Civil Rights Act was enacted in a few years before that, 1964. And before that, so it's from the late 1950s through the 1960s. And so I give this slide because, A, who knows who the gentleman on Europe? Who? Yeah. Okay, and what did he do? This is part of your, no? Who said, who over here said Dr. Martin Luther King? Yeah.
He was the leader of the civil rights movement to have equality for all races, not just African Americans, not just Caucasian, but equality and happiness throughout.
Absolutely. And so when I say life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that's something that we all aspire to, but it's not something that was taken for granted then, or nor is it taken for granted now. So this is a picture of the march, a march. And I was looking particularly at the sign that says, you know, end segregated rules, voting rights, jobs, certain things that we all aspire to have. We all aspire to have a certain quality of life. We all aspire to be free. We all aspire to have a job, to pay those student loans that will help us to have a certain quality of life. But that doesn't always come naturally or inherently for everyone. And sometimes when you are a person of difference, there are more obstacles in your way. Make sense? All right? So how do you define diversity? This is where the conversation becomes interactive again. A little chalkboard, but if you were to define diversity, how would you define it? Interactive portion. What do you think of? When you think of diversity, what do you think of? Yes, what's your name?
My name is Emma.
Emma?
Yes. When I think of diversity, I think of different backgrounds, different points of view, different beliefs. It can vary from people and actual things. So I feel like diversity itself is a word that has a lot of meanings, which is the definition of the word.
Okay. Yes, say your name because this is a unique name. Say it again.
Joe Rotunda.
Joe?
Joe Rotunda.
Joe Rotunda. Okay.
Yeah, Rotunda.
Rotunda.
Yeah.
You're saying your first and your last name.
Yeah.
Joe. So can I just call you Joe?
I think it's everything she said, but bringing all those things together in one place. Because I mean, some other countries are just one race, but America's a melting pot. So when you bring all those things together, it creates a diverse environment.
Okay. So this is where conversations and language is really power. So Emma, right? Emma was talking about different cultures and races and different experiences, different ways that people think. Joe was talking about bringing them all together. So those are like kind of the two concepts that we're dealing with. We're dealing with diversity, and then when you bring people together, we're dealing with inclusion. Now, for many, many years, we talked about inclusion being about folks coming together in the United States, about it being a melting pot. And so I want to kind of challenge you to think of it, maybe not as a melting pot, where everybody is kind of mushed together and trying to, in an effort to, because I can see you have an individual personality, rocking the hat there, but also that we celebrate the things that make us unique, the things that make us different. So maybe kind of like that really great salad as opposed to a melting pot. Anybody else? So we talked about culture, different perspectives, any other dimensions of diversity that come to mind when you think about it? Yes. Gian, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
When I think of diversity, I just think of it as like the differences in identifiers, like the differences in skin color, cultures, language, those things that people hold to themselves to identify who they are and present it to the world.
Okay, so I love that analogy or that explanation of identifiers. So does everybody know what Gian means by identifiers? And can we kind of talk about identifiers? Because sometimes we have the perception of what somebody is and how somebody identifies, and they're not always the same thing. They're not always congruent. So what would you, just for the class purpose, how do you distinguish identifiers from perception? Or how did you mean that word when you said it?
I meant it as more of like the individual at hand. So like my personal identifiers is like how I choose to give myself an identity. I know I can't use that word in definition, but it's not the same as a perceptor because that is how people are receiving you.
Right.
The way you identify isn't always the way you want people, always the way people receive you. And an example of that would be easily like a transgender individual. The way they identify is not always the way society will receive them or perceive them.
Yeah, absolutely. What's your name? I saw your hand go up and you had a thought to share.
Asia.
Asia, come share your thought.
When I think of what Gian said, in regards to identity, it to me is a long spectrum because I have to come up with ideas for like diversity programming, and for us, like it means like where you go to school, if you live in a single parent house or if your parents are together, like where you grew up, how you identify yourself in regards to like gender and sexuality, stuff like that, and it's a very broad spectrum.
France, you had a thought?
No, she said just about exactly what I was going to say. It's more than just how people see you, it's how you accept yourself, because you can be an African American and not really accept what the culture is presenting to you.
That is true. I had a video that kind of dealt with that, but I didn't have enough time to go into all of that. So here are some of my thoughts. I think you all are spot on. Race and color. Now, what's the difference between race and color as an identifier? Does anyone know? Gian?
Isn't race like the macro group of color, like black, white, and then in black you have the different colors? Like let's say in like black individuals you can have colorism.
Oh yes, you certainly can.
It's like
what's colorism for folks who don't know? Does everybody know what colorism? Does anybody not know what colorism is? Please share.
Oh, did someone raise their hand?
Yeah. That's what you get for coming to the room.
Oh, okay. No, I thought someone else raised their hand. So colorism is, it kind of works the same as racism, but it's not the same because it's within a race group. And it is basically like the idea that a certain color within a race is superior to another.
Right. So you are correct. Race, how many folks have ever filled out a census? Any? Okay, if you've ever filled out a census or have you gone to the registry of motor vehicles, anybody? Anybody? Okay, when you go to you have to check a box. And for many years, there was only like 5 boxes that you could check, and you could only be either white or black or Native American or Asian, Latino, and then in 2000, God, how many of you were born after 2000? Anybody? Oh, good. But right before, yeah? Okay, so right around the time that you were born, the census said, you know what, we have people who are being born that can't necessarily check one of those boxes, and so sometimes people have more than one race. And so they expanded the category, especially even, I think a great example is in the Latino community. So who said that? You say you're from the DR, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, they have dolls, right? And so, how many folks come to the Dominican Republic? Anybody? Okay, have you seen the dolls? Do you know the dolls that come in a range of colors? And it was very symbolic of folks from the Dominican Republic being white and black and yellow and red and having so many colors within a particular ethnicity. So there's race, there's color, there's ethnicity, and we know that within each category there are layers and layers. And so I guess the third category that should have been there is also ethnicity. So what's the difference between race, color, and ethnicity? And you could almost break it down. Anyone? Race, color, ethnicity. I saw a hand move in the back, but you guys are scratching and moving, so scratching and moving. What do you think? How does ethnicity factor in, and how is that different than race or color?
With ethnicity, isn't it like your origins, like where your roots are from? So, for me, it would be West Africa, Barbados, and Egypt.
Okay.
That would be like my ethnicity.
Your ethnicity, okay. But on the census, you probably have to check little black box. And then, so then you have religion, religious creed, and national origin. So what is the difference between religion and religious creed? Who could speak to that? These are what we celebrate in our differences. Yes, Joe? Yeah?
Yeah, there's different sections like Christianity,
Uh-huh.
like Roman Catholic or Irish Catholic.
Okay. So, and how does that play out in the world of diversity between?
Oh, they just they follow different leaders of that religion, and they believe in different aspects of the Bible.
Absolutely. And so the difference between also religion and religious creed is how you celebrate, how you honor. Are you Orthodox, or are you, someone who was just particularly born into a particular faith, whether it was, Islam or Christianity or Judaism. But then when you talk about creed, is how do you celebrate that? With your days that you celebrate, your holidays, your Sabbath days, food that you eat, and so on and so forth. So that too is a dimension. Gender identity and sexuality. What is the difference? Oh, we got pixelated quite a bit. What is gender identity and expression, and how does that differ from sexuality? Anyone? Yes, what's your name in the back? I saw you move before.
Morgan.
Hey, Morgan.
Hi. Your gender doesn't necessarily have to match like the sex you think you are. It's like what you associate yourself with.
Okay.
Like if you're a guy, but you like maybe associate yourself with like a woman, that's would be more your gender, not
Okay.
necessarily like your sex, like male, female.
Okay. Other thoughts? Break it down.
Gender identity and sexuality are not always linked together. Gender identity is how you choose to present yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Do you present as a woman? Do you present as a male? Male or female? Or do you identify as male or female? Sexuality is just your attraction, who you're attracted to.
So
they don't always work.
Yeah. Sometimes the way I think of it is sometimes gender identity is up here. How you think, and gender expression is how you express, how you perceive yourself. So it doesn't really matter how you're presenting on the outside. If you are biologically born with one set of organs, but you feel in your brain that it's incongruent, I think it's called gender dysphoria, that is your gender identity. When you wake up in the morning, you say, I'm born, I have this body, but this body does not feel like me, like who I should be, who I want to be, who I aspire to be. And sometimes that manifests itself in a spectrum of ways in which people express how they dress. And so, the glaring example up there is RuPaul, but there's a whole range of ways. And then sexuality is kind of who you're attracted to, who you love, who you choose to be romantically involved with. And then it's respecting and those differences. Also, veteran and ability status. And so when we think about ability or disability, how would you define that? How would you define disability? Do you even think about issues of ability when you think about diversity? Some groups are left out of the spectrum, but we need to think about them because they too, going back to that earlier slide, like to have a certain life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness as well. They want folks who have disabilities, and believe it or not, probably all of us at some point in our life will probably have some form of disability. There's a joke in the mature audiences that say, just wait long enough. So as I mature, hopefully you're not anywhere near this, but I feel that I need my glasses a little bit more, and my ability to hear becomes more and more challenged. And I never thought it would happen, and I hope that it wouldn't, but these are aspects of our ability. Do we have the ability to see? Do we have the ability to hear? Do we have the ability to be mobile? And so veterans have, as more and more veterans are coming back from the various different wars, they are also in pursuit of